What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 3 at the Fit Life Podcast. I'm your host, Jacqui Labadia. Today, I had mentioned this in my previous podcast. I was going to talk about macronutrients and how to track and some meal prep tips and things like that. But I'm honestly feeling super exhausted. My brain is just like, it's gone. It's been a really, really heavy week. And I don't like to be that person who seems to be complaining all the time. It's just like the matter of the circumstance right now. Um, Last week I was talking to my podcast about, it's just been one of those weeks. Like lots of things were going wrong. I had like a sty on my eye and there was sicknesses and things like that. And then it ended with my grandfather passing away. So it was honestly just one of those weeks. And now looking back on it, I kind of feel like there were some reasons for some of the things happening that did in order for some other things to kind of come to fruition and for that kind of alignment to happen, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's been a very sad week. We had his service yesterday. It was beautiful. He had a really, really amazing send off with lots of people that were kind of reconnecting, which was really nice. And it was needed. It was that closure that I needed. I personally find that time between finding out about somebody's passing to the funeral, that like limbo time between is like really, really difficult for me. And I do find that after a funeral service, I have an easier time kind of like moving forward after I have that closure. So I don't mean to like start this off as like, something that is such a bummer, but it's real and it's what's happening with me. And it's one of the reasons why I started this podcast, was because I wanted room to like be vulnerable and to show who I am and to like talk about things in my life and how I deal with them and why, the health and fitness aspect of it really plays a role in my life, and which is also why I'm super passionate about it, because it has made such a positive impact on my life. So I'm really coming into this episode. Honestly, I don't really have anything planned to talk about aside from the fact that I just wanted to come on here and be vulnerable and kind of like work through with you guys like what I've been doing to help myself cope and how health and fitness has played a role in this. I was going to try to do the macronutrient episode, but when I was sitting down with myself and trying to like outline the information, I just was finding that I was having such a hard time concentrating, and I didn't really want to forego the podcast completely. Like, I'm recognizing in myself that I really need some space for self-care right now, and this is my kind of compromise. Like, I am really loving what is coming out of this podcast, and how, even though I've only done a couple of episodes, I've been getting some really good feedback. I've been able to connect with some people on a deeper level, which I really love. And like, there's aspects of this that's happening that I want to continue, and I don't want to miss it because of the things that I'm going through. So instead, I'm just kind of pivoting, and we're going to do the macronutrient episode next week, when I'm just kind of feeling a little bit more in that headspace. And then as an alternative, I'm coming on here, I'm going to have this like episode about some inner work that I've been doing, how it has helped me in these kinds of situations, but also like what I've been doing to cope, and how health and fitness is like such an underrated way to cope with life events and things that happen in your life. And when I think a lot of like societal culture uses life events as an excuse to put this stuff on the back burner, when in reality, I really believe that it's not the time and place to do that. And I'm going to tell you about it why. So anyways, yeah, like I don't want this episode to be like a super downer or anything, but the reality is we all go through these life events. We all go through times where seasons are really stressful, or we're having difficulty with or challenges with certain things. And usually what I see a lot of is that time being where people will kind of put their self-care on the back burner when it's really not about actually use some of these mechanisms and these strategies that we're implementing for certain reasons, but also use them as leverage in other aspects of our life. So what I mean by that is I often see women come to me for strategies and coaching around fat loss. But when life gets challenging, that's when they want to put it on the back burner. And I'm not saying that there isn't a time and a place to put fat loss specifically on the back burner, but there's still a lot of benefit when it comes to the strategies we're implementing for fat loss, because they can be used on so many levels that go far beyond fat loss. And I talk about this a lot. This is why I really love health and fitness, because it's not just for like the vanity of your physique changes. It's for your physiological health, like physical health. It's for mental and emotional health, and it can be used on so many levels that it's like honestly the biggest life hack. And when it comes to different seasons of more challenging seasons of life, this is where it's like it just goes so underrated and really flies under the radar, because this is usually where people just like kind of put it to the wayside because they see it as just like an added level of stress. So this is where I'm going to kind of like, I guess, talk about what I've been doing and what I've been kind of noticing in myself over the past week when it has come to a grieving process and the other things that kind of come with that. So as probably many people know, when there is a life event, specifically a life event that happens in like a family situation and multiple people are affected, a lot of things come up. Like a lot of old wounds kind of surface. But other really good things can happen as well, like just like family reconnection and like things like that. And it's really, really emotional. It can be, and even though there's good things that come from it, there's a lot of stress as well, right? And as we talked about in the last episode, there are different levels of stress and our bodies don't recognize that, right? But I'm not necessarily sure if grief is a stressor or not. I guess it might depend on the person and how you handle it. I know for myself, there was a time in my life where if I were in a grieving process, I would have been trying my hardest to cover it up. Not that I would have been hiding it necessarily, but definitely I was not processing properly in the respect of like I would be using coping mechanisms that weren't necessarily therapeutic. So what I mean by that is that like there was a time when like I would have used it as an excuse to like have some drinks or like party or like anything to like forget about it. And I do think there's a very big difference between covering up grief or covering up stress or covering up negative feelings versus distracting yourself from them. I think distraction is more so like taking a break from the processing aspect of it. Or like, yeah, giving yourself some reprieve, even though you are processing and you are dealing with it in some way. So I'm definitely one person, like I have learned to sit with my feelings and just kind of like let myself go through those motions as uncomfortable as they can be. And I think that in itself has been growth for myself in terms of like seeing how I cope with different things now versus say like 10 years ago. I have a knack to try to be strong for everybody. And I have become that person that a lot of people go to when they are struggling. And it's not that I can't be there for them or that I'm not honored that people feel like they can come to me with certain things. But when it comes to processing my own feelings as well as taking on other people, then it becomes a lot. And I find myself wanting to dissociate, disconnect, turn my phone off just because it's not that I don't care, it's because it's a lot to handle. So I guess really with all of these things that are coming out, it's just that highlighting that importance of getting to know yourself and getting to know what you tend to do in certain situations. And because I'm talking specifically about a grieving process and the loss of a loved one, like there's so many aspects of this that come out. And what I found this past week for sure was that this grief in me was like an energy that I just needed to get out. So whether that was crying, whether that was moving my body, whether that was talking about it, and I find a lot I need to talk. I need to talk about things. And I think that's my way of getting things out of me, is that I need to talk. And maybe that's why this podcast is going to be therapeutic for me in some sense as well, because it does give me an opportunity to talk about some of these things, even though I'm not necessarily talking to somebody in a conversation. And I think that's me. I need to get things out in one way or another. And I've always been somebody who really benefits from talking about things and expressing myself, I guess. And movement this past week has been such a reprieve in that, in the sense that, like, especially when I didn't have the words, or I was tired of conversation, or I was tired of I feeling like I'm saying the same things over and over again. Movement was such a good way for me to get this energy out of me. I did a lot of walking. I did a lot of outside time. I really pushed myself in my workouts. It was just such a therapeutic way for me to get that energy out and to get some sense of relief when I was finding that grief was building up. And again, like, it's not, I don't think that that's a way of like repressing feelings or anything like that, but I do think that there's different ways of getting those feelings out, and physically doing that was so therapeutic. I know a lot of people who also find therapy in journaling, um, in like, I don't know, like maybe more aggressive ways of getting it out physically. Like, why, like there's so many reasons why like running is really good, or like classes like kickboxing, boxing, like self-defense things. I'm thinking about those different aspects where like people don't just use that as for the physiological component. There is such a big mental and emotional component as well. Getting those big feelings out and allowing yourself to release that energy is so crucial to our mental and physical well-being. We don't want to hold on to these things. We don't want to repress them. We don't want it to be stored in our body in some way either. And it all comes full circle when we don't allow that to come out of ourselves. And I think, again, like coming back to that sense of self-awareness and learning about yourself and understanding why you may or may not do certain things, a lot of it comes down to who you are as a person. It's that whole like nature versus nurture thing, right? There's a portion of it that comes down to who you are as a person. There's a portion of it that comes down to your environment, your experiences, your perspectives, like how you were brought up. And there's certain things that we do as individuals that are very much dependent on, yeah, like our lives and who we are, but also how our lives have played out. So that has been me, and some just like, I guess, light bulb moments that came up for me this week in terms of just like how I deal with things. And I definitely, yeah, like it's just, I've always known I was a talker, but now that's just like on the forefront of my mind. And it makes sense to me that like I felt called to do a podcast or like things like that, because I find a lot of self-expression through talking. And I have so much trouble being concise when it comes to expressing myself. I like providing context. I like providing like all of my thoughts, and I have a hard time being concise with them and like narrowing it down to just like like uh one point, I guess. So anyways, like just like these things are important to recognize in ourselves, not just through challenging seasons, but through good seasons as well. Like, what do we tend to do when things are going well versus what do we tend to do when things are not going so well? And how can we find a middle ground that is still going to serve us from a therapeutic perspective and from like a health optimization perspective as much as we can, just because like obviously when you're having a challenging season of life, we're probably not looking for health optimization. We're probably looking for some kind of health maintenance or like health strategy to help with that coping mechanism. Like obviously, I don't know about many other people, but I know when I'm going through like a grieving process, the last thing on my mind is weight loss or fat loss or getting stronger in the gym or anything like that. But I am trying to cope. I am trying to still be my best self given the circumstances and helping myself through that situation. And I think the same thing can be applied to like anything else that serves as a challenge, just because it's unrealistic to say that we're never going to have challenges. And we can't put our health on the back burner every time that there's a challenge in our life. And if we continue to do it that way, it's going to take us so much longer than necessary to see the results that we want to see. And I'm not just talking about physical results or like body composition results, but I'm talking about being able to experience how to thrive in life by using our health aspects. So under knowing how nutrition can serve us, knowing how sleep and stress management can serve us, and physical activity can serve us, and how do we use those things as tools when we are going through a challenging season of life, and how do we prioritize those things when we're going through a challenging season of life. I know for me this past week, there was a lot of expression in boundary setting and communication with the people that were helping me through this. So like my husband in particular, and telling him the things that I was feeling, telling him that I was feeling especially sad, or telling him that I was feeling like I needed the space, or telling him that telling him what I needed. And I think that's something a lot of women really struggle with. We either see that as like a weakness or a burden on other people or something like that. But the reality is like the most people that love us are there to help and want to see us being helped. And if we tell them that we need space or we need help, it's important to express that. And it's important to understand that asking for help is not a weakness, it's a necessity. And it is something that a lot of people struggle with because a lot of us have been raised to believe that we need to be 100% independent and that we shouldn't lean on other people. But humans are pack animals. Like, we rely on community a lot. And part of having a community of people is to have the help that we need in these circumstances that we need it the most. And the same kind of translates into motherhood too, right? Like, we cannot I don't want to say we cannot. It's not that it's not impossible, but it's so much harder to raise a small family by yourself than it is to overcome those mindset, those thoughts and beliefs that hold us back from asking for help. And yeah, like it's just important. It's just so much more. I think exploring those beliefs and understanding yourself and why you have so much trouble asking for help is really, really important in anything. I guess, like, I know, again, like, I didn't plan this podcast, so I'm kind of just like segueing into these things as like my thoughts come out. And I do think that's something that holds a lot of women back when we feel like we don't have help. But do you feel like you don't have help, or do you have trouble asking for help, even if it's potentially there? There's a big difference. So anyways, communicating that to my partner was really, really crucial this week. Communicating boundaries with some other people that I needed to communicate boundaries with was something else that I really needed to do. And just allowing myself that grace and that space to make decisions that were best for me in terms of managing everything that was happening. I knew, so I'm someone that when I am going through something and I'm more anxious and I'm processing and lots of things are racing through my mind, I have a lot of trouble sleeping. I know this about myself. So because I know that about myself, I really try to implement other things that are going to help me to sleep as well as I can. So even things like staying off my phone, trying to reduce screen time, getting outside for the most part during the day. Honestly, treating myself as a toddler in some sense, because I really try to like get more active so that I can sleep better, so that um it just kind of all comes full circle, and it all kind of like uh contributes to a potentially better night's sleep just by exhausting myself basically. And I know that that might not be the same for everybody, but that's just something that I do because I'm very, very aware of it. And it really, I don't know if anyone else here that's listening have trouble sleeping or have insomnia at times or just like have trouble turning their brains off, but it really sucks. It makes for a very, very long night when you cannot get yourself to sleep. Um, the other thing that I was also noticing in myself is that when I'm grieving or stressed out, I don't eat as much. And I know that's not the same for everybody because there's people on the other side of the spectrum that really use food as a coping mechanism and for like emotional eating. But I'm a little bit of the opposite. I find that when I'm in short-term stressful situations, I undereat and I'm not as hungry. My hunger is definitely like turned off. And then I know that when I'm under more prolonged seasons of stress, at some point that hunger turns back on and then I tend to overeat. So I almost like make up for it. So knowing that about myself, I was still making cognizant choices on what I was eating and kind of kind of keeping tabs on like, okay, when was the last time I ate something? And making sure that I was at least getting 3 meals a day, you know? So I was definitely not snacking as much, but still being cognizant of getting 3 meals into myself just because I knew that if I didn't eat something at some point, that hunger was going to return and it was going to be like out of control. So, and on top of that, even though my hunger cues were kind of turned off, I was noticing other symptoms that were coming up. So more like headaches, brain fog, fatigue, things like that, that would happen when I was going too long without eating. And those are also signs of hunger, even though the hunger wasn't necessarily coming from my belly. So if anyone can like take anything from this podcast, know that even if you don't have hunger cues coming from your stomach, there are other signs of hunger and other signs that you need to eat something. Um, and I was just paying attention to that in myself, just knowing that I was not going to be reaching for some food because I just like inherently wasn't feeling that hunger coming from my stomach. But I was noticing those other kinds of symptoms that were coming up when I was going too long without eating. So again, like this is coming down to like that know thyself kind of saying and paying attention to how I was handling things this time around when it came to like a challenging season of life versus like how I would have handled it maybe like in the past at some point. I am proud of myself for how I handled it. I think I did really, really well in terms of like really relaying what I needed during this time and just paying attention to how I felt mentally, emotionally, allowing myself to grieve when I needed to grieve, taking the space to cry and like let those things come up and like really like think about what feelings were coming up for me. And yeah, just like paying attention to those other physical aspects that come with a more stressful situation. Um, and again, like I'm sharing this because I think it translates into other types of situations where your routine is probably off and the way that you're physiologically feeling is going to be off. And what can we do in those situations? Because again, we don't want to just like eat like shit and stop moving. But we can utilize those things as um like multifaceted tools and use them for different reasons. So again, even though we can use like exercise and movement as a means to help increase your success in fat loss, we can also use them, and there's so much research and so much evidence behind this, that movement and physical exercise is also mentally and emotionally therapeutic. It releases good hormones. It helps us to feel happier. It helps us to release different stressors and things like that. So even though exercise and movement is a type of stress on our body, it is a good stress, and it is so helpful in so many different ways. And getting out in nature is so helpful in so many different ways. And like even just freaking walking, go for a 10-minute walk, and it's not just to increase your steps, it's also for you to feel good and for you to get your head in a space where you can think more clearly and you can come back to your family and feel like you're in a better place and have more patience and have more mental clarity. Like, I can't express how much benefit there is to movement and exercise, and anybody that tells you otherwise or anybody that scares you out of movement and exercise does not have your best intentions at heart. Like, there's so much nuance to it, there's so much benefit that, yeah, just like, I'm so passionate about that, and like getting people to understand that there's not really ever a good reason to stop exercising or stop moving aside from like recovering from something, like, but at some point, even like with my emergency C-sections, they want you up and walking the next day. Even though it's a major abdominal surgery through like 7 like layers of tissue and muscle and things like that, they still want you walking the next day. And there's reasons for that, because it's getting the blood flowing to your incision so that you can recover quicker. And there again, like, it's not just about movement to like a certain intensity, it's moving your body, like not sitting, not being sedentary. And so it just has so many different levels to it, and there's so many different purposes to movement and exercise that it's a wonder to me why it's not more known, that the benefits that you're missing out on if you are not moving or exercising is not immediately like pushed on you through other means of healthcare and things like that. Anyways, and then the same goes with nutrition. Even though I wasn't eating, the meals that I was choosing were still very much protein based, very much plants, carbs, things like that, things that were going to serve me from a nutritional purpose, but also help me to feel my best self in this given situation, whatever that kind of looks like. Even drinking my water and staying hydrated, like making sure that all of these things were still happening so that, again, I wasn't going to feel more shittier. I don't even know how to put this in like, more professional terms, but I didn't want to feel more shittier than I already felt. So making sure that these things were in place were going to help me feel my best self in this given circumstance as much as I could. So anyways, yeah, they all have a time and a place. It's all a matter of helping you cope through these things. I do think there is a level of mental and emotional resiliency when it comes to implementing some of these strategies for your health, and in terms of like helping you mitigate not just the emotions that come with it, but the stress and some of the physiological things that you might experience because of the stress. So for me, like the sleep, for example, and how is that going to play a role in how, and again, like, I don't want to say how quickly that you kind of bounce back from a situation like this, because obviously there's no timeline on grief, and grief is always going to be there in some way, shape, or form, and you just need time. But how can we make the best out of a crappy situation? Like, how can we play our cards in a way that is going to help us to cope so that we can still have some normalcy, we can still show up in other aspects of our life? Like, I can't sit there on a day-to-day basis and feel sad about my grandfather passing when I also have a business to run, and I have clients to pay attention to, and I have kids to pay attention to, and I have another job that I need to go to and show up for. Like, there are situations where, as much as we want to shut down, or as much as we would love to shut down, it's not possible to do that. And the way to deal with that is not to put our health goals on the back burner, but to shift our perspective and how they're serving us and how they're still allowing us to show up in the other aspects of our life, as well as to cope with the stuff that is hard in the moment. Yeah. So anyways, it's been a heavy week. I don't know how much longer I can really keep going to talk about this, but that's just how I've been dealing with it. And I think part of me just wants to honestly express this and show this vulnerability in terms of like, yeah, like we all go through shitty situations. We all have challenges. And this is how we can help ourselves to get through them. I don't want people coming to me or leaving my coaching service. I should say that. I don't want people ever leaving my coaching service thinking that nutrition and exercise and managing their sleep and managing their stress and staying hydrated, I don't want them ever thinking that the only reasons we implement them are for fat loss. And as much as I love helping people with that transformation, and even with myself, I've been sharing a lot of my own transformation lately because I'm really proud of it, but it's not the only reason that I implement these different health strategies, because there's so much more to it. There's such a deeper level to that. And I'm not saying that the physical things aren't important, because they are. I do think that having your best physique, or like, I don't want to say best physique because I don't want you to picture like, I don't mean best physique in the sense of like the least amount of fat mass or anything like that, but like if you feel good in your body and you feel strong and you feel confident and you look in the mirror and you like what you see, that translates into so many other aspects of our life and our confidence and showing ourselves what we can do. And going back to that metaphor of breaking the glass ceilings, that is where that can be really important, and that can be really translative into other aspects. But also, the same things that we implement for that physical change can also be implemented for the mental change as well, and doing that inner work and exploring that sense of ourselves in the sense of like, how can I be better? How can I be a better person? How can I show up better? What can I do inside? What kind of things do I have to work on inside so that I can live my life in a way that is more fulfilling, and in a way that I can leave this world knowing that I did the absolute best that I could, that I grew as a person, and that I pursued many different things, and that I was successful in the pursuit of these many different things that I wanted to pursue and that I wanted to achieve, and that I'm leaving a mark on the world and a mark on my family and the people that I love that is going to forever live as my legacy. Like, it's so much more than that. That's why health and fitness is just so important to me, and getting people to understand that prioritizing these things is not just about the surface layer of physical changes. It's so much more than that, and it translates into so many other things that are way more important in life and way more important than what we see in before and after pictures. So anyways, I guess I'm getting that off my chest. Also, yeah, just being here and being real, and hopefully whoever's listening to this can relate on some level and take something away from this. And the next time you go through a challenging season of life, remember these tips, and remember that it's the last thing that you want to do is put your health on the back burner. And I'm not saying that you need to show up 100%, but figure out a way that you can scale back in a way that's realistic for you, even if it's just going for an evening walk every night and realizing that that movement is going to serve you, even if it's just getting your water intake in, realizing that that's going to serve you. Like, whatever you can do during more challenging seasons of life is going to benefit you and help you to mitigate those kind of challenges. So I think I'm going to wrap this up here. Thank you for listening. And if you've made it this far, thank you for kind of hearing out my vulnerability and realizing that I'm human too, you know? Coaches are humans, and we have ways of dealing with our own things. We have our own things that are challenging for us. And that's the reality of it. And I think the people that have been in the fitness industry for long enough have been at this long enough to know how to implement these things. But that's also why we're here, to help other people to learn how to implement these things when things get challenging. And it looks a little bit different for everybody. So anyways, thank you for listening. I promise next week will be my episode on macronutrients. But I did want to show up today in some way, and I just wanted to share this part of my life because that's honestly why I started this podcast. So thank you so much. I hope this lighting looks better today. Just FYI, I was playing around a little bit so that just didn't look so harsh. But yeah, hopefully this happens, and that's it. Okay. I hope everyone has a great day, and we'll see you next week.